This is the story of Frank Lloyd Wright. I apologize first to Barb. Barb was in Chicago and went to the Unity Temple, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Did you go to a couple of his houses as well?
Yes.
Yes. And she sent me some photographs, and I said, oh, Barry or Tom could probably run these, and you had intended for me to look through them and sort them out. I didn't do that. This is my shame.
It's my shame, but I didn't follow up.
Well, I'm very sorry. I did not. But maybe on the round robin,
yeah, I'll try to
post some of them. Yeah. I was expecting a lot of audio-visual support for this. Carol, you said that you grew up in a house next to a Frank Lloyd Wright house. Did you have
Absolutely.
a photograph you wanted to show us?
Sure.
Oh,
wow.
And what was the name of this house?
Okay, this is the Avery Cooley house, and Frank Lloyd Wright considered it the most successful of his homes. It was his favorite home. Okay, can I talk for a second, or?
You can talk for many seconds. Go right ahead.
Oh, you'll be sorry. I can. This is in Riverside, Illinois. Riverside is called a village in a park. Riverside was designed in the 1870s by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaughn, who designed Central Park. And it was the first suburb outside of Chicago when Chicago was growing, and it was on the rail line, old steam engines and all that good stuff. And so the high mucky mucks that worked in Chicago built mansions out there, and the village was designed, all these winding roads, almost half of it was set aside as parks. They planted full-grown trees, and I mean, it's along a river. It's beautiful. And they had gas lights, which are still there. They're not gas now, but they still look like the old gas lights. The streets were all sunken, so you looked across the parks and didn't even see the streets. So there were a whole lot of Victorian mansions being built there. And so Frank Lloyd Wright came in, and this was when he was starting his prairie homes,
Prairie style,
which are prairie style homes, which are the epitome of, like, you know, the flatness of the prairie, but going along with the landscape and the feel of wherever, you know, wherever the site, wherever they're built. And so he built this home, which was at the time 9,000 square feet. I actually have an aerial view. This is the house, and it was on a whole city block, town block, and there was the house, then there was the stables, the gardener's house, and then there was another house a little bit on the next block, because the Coonleys, they were in great favor of childhood education, and their daughter at the time was 4 years old, so she couldn't go to school, so they built the Avery Coonley School Playhouse, where they educated children, and you may have seen these are the windows from it. You may have seen them. They're in the Metropolitan Museum of Art now. But anyway, in the 50s, this was a white elephant. I mean, you know, who could maintain a house like this? Oh, I forgot to say, it was the first one where he used zoned construction. Like, there was one public area that was the living room and dining room, and then there was another wing that was the bedroom wing and the guest wing, and then there was another wing that was the servants and the kitchen wing. So in the 50s, they were thinking of tearing it down and building 4 14 modern houses. Well, they compromised. They built 5 modern houses, one of which is right here, which is where I lived. It's a little ranch house. I did not live in a mansion. And so they built 5 ranch houses, and then the stables and the gardener's house and the playhouse were made into residences. So that was the compromise. And the home, of course, is on the, and they divided the main home into 2 parts. So there's one part, there's a firewall in between. So there's 2 parts of the main house. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. It's also a National Historic Landmark, which is houses or buildings of outstanding historical significance. About 3% of those on the National Register are National Historic Landmarks. And the whole town of Riverside is a historic landmark district, and this is considered a contributing property to that, one of the main properties that makes the town what it is. And this is the view from the property where I grew up, except there's foliage in between, but this was the view we had. So,
very nice. Lucky girl.
Yeah, it was a beautiful place to grow up, and we joked that nobody who grew up in Riverside could afford to live there after we grew up. Anyway, but it's beautiful, and a lot of the Victorian mansions are still there, but this Frank Lloyd Wright estate is considered, he considered it his best. So.
I grew up in Riverside also, but not Riverside, Illinois. There are several towns named Riverside in the United States, one in Southern California and the one I grew up in on Long Island Sound in Connecticut. Frank Lloyd Wright, yes, today would be his birthday. He was frequently described as a genius. That's a very loaded word, as I'm sure you know. Many men who are described as geniuses behave very badly. Not just to their associates, but particularly to the women in their lives and their children, if they manage to maintain relationships with their children. And Frank Lloyd Wright was no exception. The irony in all of this was that he was catnip to women. He attracted them everywhere he went, and he was a serial philanderer and adulterer, and that was our boy Frank. He was recognized by the American Institute of Architects in 1991 as the greatest American architect of the time. Falling Water, which some of you may have seen, a beautiful house in Pennsylvania. It extends out above a waterfall. You put flying buttresses under it, and you see the fall coming down underneath it. If you Google Falling Water, you will see what it looks like. Absolutely beautiful. The thing that characterizes his work the most is not his bad boyness. It was his reverence for the natural world. He wanted architecture to relate to the natural world. His theories were all about organic architecture. So Falling Water was built in a particular way so that the water came down below it and went out. He had 2 other homes that were very famous. One was Taliesin, a Welsh word that he gave to his favorite longtime residents, the Taliesin estate, and he built another one in Arizona, which is where his ashes were finally buried at the estate in Arizona. It's the Welsh word meaning shining bow, and when you see photographs of that building, it's across the top of a ridge, all the way along it. But as he put it, he wanted to create a home that was of the hill, not just on it. He wanted it to reflect the rise of the hill beneath him. So his style came to be called the prairie style, as Carol mentioned. And many of his residences were very low to the ground because the prairie was low to the ground. An exception to this, of course, would be the Guggenheim Museum. Have any of you been to the Guggenheim? You have to go. It is such a spectacular building, and so contradicts everything else he designed, because it's built as a series of spirals like this, white spirals It's on Upper Fifth Avenue. You can go. The person I was with yesterday, who knows nothing about architecture, said to me, well, what did he design? And I said, do you know what the Guggenheim Museum is? Oh. Have you been there? No. I said, why don't you go sometime? I said, just don't bring your skateboard with you. There have been films made of people skateboarding from the top level down the spiral all the way to the bottom. I wouldn't dare. I swear you'd break your neck if anything happened on your skateboard. But I have seen film of people doing it. It's generally a place that displays modern art because, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright was the modern person in his time.
Julie, Reverend Julie, do
Yes.
you want visuals? I have visuals.
Okay. Do you have a visual of the Guggenheim?
I do.
Okay, let's see it.
Look at this.
This is the inside.
You see what I mean? It's a long ribbon pathway that goes down to the street. You do not start at the bottom and walk up. You'll never make it. You take the elevator to the top and then you walk down. It's beautiful. See the spider web at the top?
Yeah.
This is the outside.
Yeah. Totally bizarre. You know, totally bizarre in its setting, surrounded by straight buildings, you know, skyscrapers. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Okay.
He had a terrible reputation. He was very matter of fact and extremely opinionated, and he never kept his opinions to himself. Forbes magazine for his birthday in 2017 said this: he was a narcissist and control freak, a spendthrift and an adulterer who led a life marked by scandal, debt, and even murder. I'm not going to talk about the murder. Along the way, Frank Lloyd Wright designed the most innovative buildings of 20th century America, or as he would tell you, the whole world. Initially buried at Unity Chapel, which is a smaller place. Unity Temple is in Chicago, yes? Unity
Oak Park. Oak Park, outside of Chicago.
Right outside, yeah. Unity Chapel is in Wisconsin. He was born in Wisconsin. He was very much a man of the Midwest. So it's not surprising that he focused a lot on the scenery around him and that he built his initial buildings reflect a lot of the flatness of the Midwest. Here are two pithy quotes from him, and I mean pithy. In architecture, a doctor can bury his mistakes, but an architect can only advise his client to plant vines. There are a lot of vines at my house. And this on pride. Early in life, I had to choose between honest arrogance and hypocritical humility. Honest arrogance and hypocritical humility. He knew he wasn't humble. He was never humble. His motto, and this is repeated in many places, is truth against the world. He regarded himself as a truth teller. He wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. He told it as he saw it. There are more than 1,100 designs throughout his 70-year career, but I believe surviving now only about 300 of his buildings. Most of the houses that he designed were spread all across the Midwest, going north to south. Some in California. There are some that were built here in New Jersey, but almost all the homes in New Jersey have been torn apart and, or destroyed by the ages. So there's very little left around here, but you have seen some of these. You did, Barb. Would you like to describe Unity Temple? What did that look like to you? Do you want to come up here to the microphone?
It's very boxy.
Yeah.
From the outside.
Barb, hold the microphone down to you. Thank you.
And this is the sanctuary itself. I love the lights and the levels. He felt that one of the interesting things was he felt that the ministers should be very equal with the congregation, and there are doors that you don't see when you're sitting there, and when it was time to leave, you had to go out when these doors also didn't open, and you greeted the minister there, so you were on like an equal level. There's also a community area on the other side, which was like where we would have coffee hour or had other kinds of gatherings, and very nice Sunday school ones too that were designed. But you know, he was really into geometry. He loved circles, squares, and triangles. You see, there's a lot of geometry in what he did. You'll see the geometry in his stained glass windows, and in the design with paneling with those kind of geometry in it. I love being there. There's an amazingly beautiful energy between the fact that I love Frank Lloyd Wright and I love being in you. It was such a great marriage of both. I did not get to attend the service, but just being and sitting quiet in the sanctuary was a real gift.
You know, when he was studying, in the early days when he was studying advanced education, there were no courses in architecture that he could take. So he studied engineering instead, and you see it really clearly in the Unity Temple. The lines, the geometrics of things, he was very aware of them. One of the more, famous or infamous parts of his life was the attention that the writer Ayn Rand paid to him. She was the author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, which some of you may have read years ago. There was a movie made of The Fountainhead with Gary Cooper starring as an architect. This was prompted, almost everyone believes, by her feelings about Frank Lloyd Wright. They were not involved, and yet they corresponded for years. And there's a lot of this on the internet. If you Google her name, A-Y-N, Rand, R-A-N-D, you can find out a lot about this. It was very intense. She was a Russian Jew who had escaped from Russia, immigrated to the United States, and then became the founder of a philosophy called objectivism. And she had a lot to say about Frank Lloyd Wright because there were objects in the things that he did. And there was no personal, interact, none of that. But they had a lot to say to one another. And you might find that interesting. In the movie of The Fountainhead, which everyone believes was prompted by what Frank Lloyd Wright was like, a real iconoclast, the main character designs a building. It's bought by a corporation. He doesn't want them to have it. He insists that it can only be built to his specifications. And of course, they completely corrupt the design, and he then explodes the building in Manhattan. He sets dynamite and destroys the whole building. And I thought to myself, yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright probably felt like that. Don't know if he did it, but he probably felt like that. The truth of his design was what he wanted people to see, not a fancy variation that modified it, made it easier to deal with than all the rest. Frank Lloyd Wright never chose the easy way for anything. So that's my story about Frank Lloyd Wright, and thank you for the visuals. That's great. Mahalo.
Julie, will you watch that on this practicing you?
No, and I do not know how he became one, but he was a dedicated member of the Unity Temple in Chicago. There's nothing about it, even in this book. This is a classic book. This Day in Unitarian Universalist History. I looked him up here. In fact, that was what prompted me to talk about him today, because it's his birthday. He was born in Rockland Center, Wisconsin. He began his apprenticeship in Oak Park, Illinois, the picture where Carol was speaking about, and developed a devoted following. He lectured and wrote exclusively, published an autobiography, and mentored many other students. He's considered to be by many to be America's foremost architect and championed the Prairie style. He built 532 homes, but he designed 1,100 buildings, and he also designed a lot of furniture to suit the style, which you mentioned, to suit the style inside of the buildings, including Unity Temple in Oak Park, Illinois, the First Unitarian Society of Madison, Wisconsin, the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, and the Guggenheim Museum in New York. He believed that people should not have to be rich to live in beautiful homes, and he tried to design artistic, affordable housing that complemented natural surroundings. He was an active member of the First Unitarian Society of Madison, Wisconsin, and he died April 9th, 1959. So he had a long and stormy life with a tremendous amount of creative energy in it. And it would be interesting to know how he became a Unitarian. There's nothing in anything I read that describes that as having any connection with his parents. I have a feeling it appealed to him because of the freeness, the free-thinkingness of Unitarians. I'm sorry? Yes.
One of the amazing things about Ewing's architecture out there is he was building at the same time that the Victorian era was flourishing. The Victorians were, with all the stuff that they do and all the the overdone interiors with doilies and things everywhere. He's all about simplicity and very, very clean lines, and he loved to make you, he would never have a front door right where you could sit. You had to find the front door. It was like a little adventure to get to the front door of every house. And they're almost always marked by big urns with flowers, big round urns, but there's also always a square and a triangle somewhere with the urns. Then when you go in, he'd like to have you go into a small space and to go into a bigger space, which happened a lot in Union Town, going in all his homes. He loved the fireplace, and there would always be a beautiful fire, no often with a built-in place to sit near it. I'll send this picture when I send the pictures on YouTube or to our website. The dining room, I was in his home, the first home he ever built, when he built for his family. The dining room has this gorgeous, gorgeous wooden table with high back chairs, and then a lovely chandelier over it, one of his lighting fixtures. He built it that way so that when you were sitting at the table, you were like in this little, almost like in a little tent, and you were in this very intimate space when you were dining. So he really, the furniture all mattered, everything mattered. He wanted to create this whole space, very, very well thought out, and I don't know how comfortable most of his houses would have been actually. They were really incredible to look at. The books are very, very difficult to work with. If you were planning to have a house built by him, you'd better have a budget way bigger than the one you gave him, because he never lived within his budgets. And he just, if you said it was going to be 20, you might spend 45,000 back in the day. So he did what he wanted to do it, and he paid for it. But you would get something very interesting. The sad thing, and one of the reasons so many of his houses do no longer exist, is they were not built to last. They were built to last like 50 to 75 years. And so many of them now are taking multi-millions of dollars to maintain, because the construction materials he used were not meant to last. He used earth tones and very quiet, calm tones, and again, contrast to all of the vibrant hues and colors of the Victorians. And it's really funny when you're out there and you're on a street, and there's a Frank Lloyd Wright house, very simple, a box, and then the big Victorian with all the stuff on it. So, and then the contrast is amazing. And he was, for all his idiosyncrasy, was an absolute gifted, creative man, and it was an honor to experience a lot of his architecture.
Maybe we should consider this a birthday party for Fred. The service is running long.
So in the 50s, they